Episode 6 starts with Toya and his harem showing up at a big mansion the king picked out for him. He just sort of assumes the girls are going to live with him there, in understandable reaction considering how they have, up until now, lived together in the same inn, and they work together daily, but they read romantic implications from it and get all flustered. Yumina then works off-screen to organize the inevitable harem ending, convincing the other girls to all agree to romance Toya together. Toya is given a tour of the mansion and is given some staff which now work for him. He then gets a visit from the Duke. Both the Duke and his daughter Sushi express that they are interested in Sushi marrying Toya and are hoping for her to join the harem. Save me, Chainsaw Man! The Duke then gives Toya a mission. He wants Toya to travel to the nation of Beast People so that he can ferry the Beast King over with a gate spell so that the two kings can have an audience. He reluctantly agrees, and so he and an entourage all begin their great adventure. On this adventure, they run into some bandits, but Toya takes them out while barely exerting himself. Some random night guy develops an inexplicable crush on the ambassador from earlier, and Toya plays wingman for him briefly. Then, a dragon attacks a town, and the gang rushes in to try and stop it. Toya manages to kill it, and then an elder dragon comes in, wishing to apologize for the young dragon's greed and violence. Seeing that Toya has tamed a very powerful magical beast, however, the elder dragon goes from diplomatic but confident to all but prostrating itself in front of Toya, who it now sees as his superior. We end the episode with him waking up, his head resting on Yumina's lap, and it's revealed that all the girls did rock, paper, scissors to determine who would get to do this. End of episode. So the first thing I want to talk about is the way the harem is being handled. It's enough of an ask for this show to handle a single romantic subplot, and so it's pretty unreasonable to expect it to handle 4 of them. What the show did is basically combine these 4 characters into a single love interest. They just are the harem. For a large portion of the episode, they don't even feel like individual characters and are more akin to a hydra. But one of the biggest changes is that they've been promoted to tsundere. They now consider themselves Toya's love interests, and so they act with some amount of bashfulness and self-consciousness, like they are going to inevitably end up with him. Something Toya has had no say in. They show aggression at him for not picking up on cues and treating them like friends. Yumina openly talks about how she wishes he'd be more physically affectionate, and in general, his desire to treat them platonically is seen not as a wish of his, but as him being slow on the uptake. The end result is, effectively, a hostile work environment. The second thing I want to discuss is this terrible wingman subplot, which really shows the complete inability of the author to write romance. The knight isn't a self-insert, he's just supposed to be a character in a romantic storyline, so you'd expect all of the negative externalities of self-inserts to be absent. We aren't projecting onto him, so there's no incentive for the author to just have the girl throw herself at him or get all flustered when he does incredibly basic things or anything like that. But the reality is that the author is just a bad writer. The romantic subplot starts with that terrible trope where the girl just looks at him and says something totally normal, making him inexplicably flustered as if this was some sort of love interest sleeper phrase. Like, she just is a girl that thanked him once. Here we see a pretty cynical and traditionalist view of romance, which appears far too often in anime, where love is basically a black box. It just happens, and from that point on, it's beautiful. He doesn't fall for her because of her personality, or her virtue, or her actions, he just does. It's a failure to do the bare minimum that speaks to a belief that the bare minimum is outright unnecessary. What's even more unrealistic is that the girls relay that the ambassador likes him back and is just waiting for him to make a move, basically. Just a piece of advice to the men out there: if a girl thanks you for something fairly minor and you instantly fall in love with her, she doesn't like you back, and the reason she isn't romantically approaching you is not because she believes men should make the first move. The more I think about it, the more this whole situation drives me insane. It's so profoundly lazy and at the same time loaded. This is a depiction of essentially mutual love at first sight, a powerful and controversial topic drawn on not for the apparent beauty of it, but instead because it means you don't need to try. The end result is a wish fulfillment fantasy that no one should wish for. It is the age-old belief that romance is a thing that happens to women. The fantasy here is not of a man being romanced, of a man being treated in a way which is desirable, but one of easy answers. Men are trained by society to try and identify green lights because they are trained to think that they have to be the one in the driver's seat. Neither Toya nor the knight are being treated well. Their emotional needs are not being met, they are not being helped or looked out for, they are not being treated as equals worthy of respect, patience, and dignity. When romance is seen as a thing that a man accomplishes rather than a project which is worked on together, it is stressful and isolating. The anime asks lonely men not to break down the walls of the mental prison they are locked in, but to imagine a fantastical situation where someone as lonely as them has a key to the door. This is a very good example of how patriarchy cuts both ways. Patriarchy, the amalgamation of social forces which push individuals into their assigned gender roles, is neither misogynist nor misandrist, but instead fundamentally toxic, both socially and, in this case, narratively. Narrative is best when it seeks to understand the human condition, when it seeks to understand people, but truly understanding these things is to question biases and social norms. The easy answers of patriarchy, the easy answers of our society, which demean women and men alike, are a floodgate, a series of thought-terminating cliches which are part and parcel with laziness. Demeaning views of men and women lead to lazy writing, and laziness in writing leads to demeaning thematic messages. No story will ever be free from the biases of its time, but a fundamental inability to question them implies either ideological orthodoxy or, in this case, just a complete hack writer. The last thing I want to discuss with regards to this episode is the run-in with the dragon, because it's an enormous missed opportunity. The setup here isn't bad, but there's just such an obvious choice for them to have gone with, which they just didn't take. When the dragon learned about how strong Toya was, it should have taken interest in him without explicitly treating him like a superior. The way it was done in this episode takes this imposing force who could represent heights that Toya is yet to reach, powerful individuals he's yet to impress. It could represent a sense of tension and anticipation, as we see how Toya lives up to and then exceeds this dragon's expectations of him. Instead, the dragon is just another person praising Toya, and we have thoroughly saturated that market at this point. It's just so overwhelmingly pointless. If you enjoyed this video, then like and subscribe with notifications on, leave a comment telling me what you thought of the video, and if you want me to keep making more of these, then subscribe to my Patreon. The link is in the description. And as always, thank you to my patrons, especially my Tier 2 patrons, Bellman, Carolyn Vig, and Love Your Content.